our special study item 6A, COVID status update considerations for return in-person instruction. Oh, well, let's go ahead and do the pledge, sorry. I don't want to get in trouble.
And we didn't do roll call.
Oh, man, I just went crazy, didn't I? I'm skipping
You
all
did.
the procedure. I'm sorry, Mr. Valencia, that was a bad example.
Here we go. Mr. Lara. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I apologize, you guys. Kristen, can we get a roll call, please?
Yeah. Mrs. Flores?
Here?
Mr. Lara?
Here.
Mrs. Cordero?
Here?
Mr. Hollingshead?
Here. All right, as the Pledge of Allegiance has already been said, we'll go to public comments. We have one public comment, I believe, this evening, and so therefore the main thing to be cognizant of is that the testimony shall be limited to 3 minutes or 450 words. But that also being said, that there is one, we always entertain the full breadth of comments so that we can hear you. Mr. Ontiveros?
Yeah, there is one public comment this evening. Dear SMBSD school board members, my name is Krista Kringle. I am a 5th grade teacher at Miller School. I've been teaching at SMBSD for nearly 30 years. My husband and I are Santa Maria residents and have sent all 3 of our sons to Miller, Bessler, El Camino, and Santa Maria High School. We support our district and the public school system. This school year has been one like no other. Unfortunately, the SMBSD is proceeding as if it is a regular school year. Teachers have been asked to not only teach through distance learning, but to administer online testing, NWEA, to our students. It is one more layer of stress placed upon us and the students. At this time, we should be given support, not extra stress to an already stressful situation. I administered both the language arts and math NWEA tests. The district stated that it would take 45 minutes, 1 hour for each subject. It actually took 3 days for each subject, a total of 6 days of valuable teaching time wasted on testing. We already have reduced time with our students, and then to have even less time was troubling to me. More than anything, these test results cannot be thought of as valid and so cannot be used by us. Parents are helping students, students are being assisted by siblings, and some students were continually kicked out of the system. We just heard from Dr. Fisher at our district in-service how kids are becoming proficient at cheating on online tests. It was frustrating for the students as well as for the teachers. We were given phone numbers to call for help and printouts on how to troubleshoot. It is an incredibly difficult task to troubleshoot, maintain a Zoom meeting, monitor kids in and out of the test, plus deal with tech issues such as kids being kicked out of the system and then unable to log back in. Why was this not put off like other districts chose to do? How much money was spent on this test, money that was so sorely needed for other tools that we don't have? I also am concerned that a number of teachers have been reprimanded for reaching out to board members and district office personnel. I was unaware that we, as citizens of Santa Maria who elected the board members, cannot reach out to them with our concerns. In the past, I do not ever remember being told that we could not contact our school board members. This is a grave injustice and it is unethical. Are we allowed to have contact with board members, or are we to be silenced and expected to not question? My students are awesome. They show up to Zoom every day and participate in class. My parents and families are supportive and they are trying their hardest to make the best out of this situation. I just wish those at the district level would see that less is more. We do not need extra testing and extra stress to an already unsettling year. Sincerely, Krista Kringle, 5th grade teacher, Miller School. And that is the public comment for this evening. As always,
Myself. As always, we are not given to respond directly to those concerns, and it is my prerogative as the president to ask personnel to look into those things. as indicated, and I think, you know, that this is a tough one because, you know, as Krista said, she's a good friend of most of us. We've known her for a long time, and her dedication and her integrity is in my mind anyway, without question. So, you know, I think I've never had the impression that that there was a lack of access to us as board members. I think, unfortunately, because there is only so much good communication that goes out through our current format, unless we're personally with one another, things get either misinterpreted or the full message doesn't get out. I think from my standpoint anyway, what I've tried to encourage folks who we do want to hear first and foremost, always, right? That's what we're here for, right? To listen. I think understanding the governance aspect of things, in that we are all just individuals on a board, and so things have to come to us, and then we collectively move on with them. So yes, we do want to hear, but as individuals, we're listening, but actionable things are not always going to be there for us to do. So in turn, I think from my personal aspect, or my personal point of view, my interpretation has been that in order to best facilitate communication, that coming to me as an individual, I want to listen, but at the same time, the efficiency of that is not in keeping with what we're trying to do on the sites, which is have folks interacting. I know Krista's obviously doing that because she's a leader, as for just using her as an example, but trying to have people then go to their site administration, especially since different sites deal with things differently, right? And this is something we found on the junior highs lately. So, you know, to be able to go to their site, either their grade level, their admin, and so I think that's where this perception of chain of command has probably been, or misperception of it has been, is that we're just trying to make sure that everybody really is communicating on that level, so that it comes as it ascends through those things, depending on what the critical nature of it is, then there's clear articulation of the intent, or what the difficulties are. All that being said, Krista, and those who are listening, I just went ahead and responded to a public comment. I'm sorry. But I kind of wanted to clarify, because I feel like, and you guys, if you agree, I think that's kind of more of the direction we've been why we've been ourselves trying to help redirect some of those things. Not that we're not listening, because I mean, again, we're not able to do site visits like we have in the past and be able to just see the classroom and hear people. And what little of the classrooms we see is, as Krista stated so well, and so many people have articulated, in a normal classroom. So, but I welcome, and we welcome hearing from you guys, and I hope that a resolution of some of these perceptions of feeling that we're being shielded from you, or that there's any kind of persecution or fear of not talking to us because of that, would be allayed by us validating you tonight. So sorry, Mr. Ontiveros, if we could move on to our first study session topic, that would be 6A COVID-19 status update. Oh, sorry, I got to approve the agenda. Man, I'm all over the map tonight. Well, there's no consent agenda. Okay, approve the agenda.
I'll move to approve the agenda as presented.
Well, so Mrs. Cordero moved and Mr. Lara seconded that the agenda be approved as presented. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Flores? Aye. Mr. Lara?
Aye.
Mrs. Cordero? Aye. Mr. Hollingshead.
Aye. And I must have really been looking so forward to COVID-19 status update considerations for return to in-person instruction that I jumped the gun twice. Can we do that now?
Yes, we can.
Si se puede.
Yes.
Okay.
And just as a reminder, we've historically held this October work study session in alignment with the LCAP local indicators. Because the LCAP has been reconfigured this year. There's some different pieces that will be coming downstream, but we wanted to take advantage of tonight to go through, give an update on the whole COVID situation. Because at the last meeting on the 14th, the county, just the day before, Santa Barbara County had elevated to red in that tiered system. And then I shared the local data with the board that Santa Maria, it as an entity, was not at that level. And so I just want to provide a brief update and some of the things that have been in place since. And then the next item will actually be an assessment overview that will include a description of some of the NWAI elements. And then we've got Mr. Segura online because the board had requested getting an update on the NEA grant for the full-time release. So as I'm going to start my screen sharing, I believe. And it always looks different on a Chromebook than on my desktop. Yeah, pretty much. And so here we are. Everybody see that on their screens? Okay. So I just want to go through briefly just 4 quick topics around this consideration for in-person instruction. Obviously, as the situation improves across Santa Barbara County, there's some differing elements across the county, and so I just want to review those elements this evening. So the first point I want to cover is that monitoring on a countywide and local case rates. I'll go back through that because we did this. Actually, the September meeting was the last time we went through all of the metrics. So I spent a little time looking back at the metrics. Talk a little bit about surveillance testing and what that means and where we are in that process of getting surveillance testing up and running. Where we are with this targeted group, cohort group, and the considerations for those in place for in-person instruction. And then finally, where we are in that communication plan. So in monitoring those countywide local case rates, I want to spend a minute going back to this blueprint for a safer economy. This is the state website. And again, all of the metrics for monitoring case rates, positivity rates, and now the newest element is the Equity Health Index are contained within this website. And so this is the breakdown of the levels. The widespread is a combination more than 7 new daily cases per day per 100,000 population, or positivity rates higher than 8% within a county. There is no health equity quartile associated with that purple rate because the whole county at that point is widespread. Mm-hmm. Substantial is the rate where Santa Barbara County is right now, and I'll share the local data here in a minute. We're in between 4 and 7 new daily cases. We're below the positivity rate and below the percentage of positive tests in those health equity quartiles in those areas that have been deemed inequitable tracts within each of the census maps. Yeah, that's something new. And so there are 21 areas within the census maps that have low quartile ratings in terms of home ownership, socioeconomics, that are identified as high need areas. Of the 21 in the county, 11 of them are in the Santa Maria census tract area. And so those are being tracked on a countywide basis. And so I'll share that information where we are at the moment, but we're currently in the red level. And so this map, California depicts all 58 counties. It shows that as of the reporting yesterday, comes out every Tuesday, but it's actually a reporting that goes back. If you see, I've got, you can see my cursor. It's really for the week ending October 17th, because this is always with a 7-day lag, but there's a 3-day lag to the reporting. So it's always 10 days. The date that's reported is 10 days preceding the date of when it's published, which was the 27th. So all this data at this point contained in this file is based on where counties were on the 17th of October.
So does that mean there's a 3-week lag instead of a 2 week?
So it's 10 days.
But the scan that they're looking at is.
I'll get to that in just a second. That's part of the map. So I just want to note that lag in reporting, even though we talk about 7-day lag, by the time the state reports, it's 10 days, because it's that week that ends on Saturday, but they don't report till Tuesday. So that adds an additional 3 days. So what you can do on this map is populate the county. And so this is where Santa Barbara County falls. Currently, the reporting date on 10/27, we were substantial as a county. Substantial the week prior on the 20th, which again is actually data back to the 10th of October, because it's 10 days previous. Substantial the week the reporting date on the 13th, which was the 3rd, and then substantial on the 6th, which goes back to the September 26th, was the first time that the county had got below that 7% daily case. So the county has been in this substantial range for 4 weeks. So back on the 13th, schools were eligible to reopen. There actually had been 2 public schools in Santa Barbara County that had filed for waivers prior to that time. Cold Spring in Santa Barbara and Montecito School. You know, again, low enrollment schools. Cold Spring has about 160 students. Montecito has about 330, I believe. They were able to meet all the distancing protocols on those sites.
All right.
So that's, again, this is that statewide tracking metric system. And so I'll go back into my presentation, I think. Seems like this little cursor always covers my tab. Oh, thanks, Brian. No, it's not going. I'll go back to sharing it to the other file then. Pop back up there. So the next piece I want is look at the Santa Barbara County website. So this is taking that state data and breaking it down further. So this is the surveillance metrics, and this gets updated on a daily basis. Takes a minute to load.
So somebody who's part of our meeting could go to this same thing, and this would be what they're looking at.
Yeah.
So it's timely.
So this, yeah, Santa Barbara Public Health, and it's this. Really, it mirrors the state metrics, but they do it within that 7-day period. And so the 7-day lag, the county rate is 4.76. What showed in that prior screen when I was on the state was 4.9. So since the 17th, the county rate based on 7 days previous, back on the 21st, we're at 4.76 a daily case rate. And so as you scroll down, this is a snapshot of the daily positive rates back to the 21st. I don't know if you can see that on the screen. That's the actual 7-day lag. And so when you take the 7 days prior to the 21st, add those daily case rates, divide by 7, gives a number that's divided by the countywide population, multiplied by 100,000, gives us that, the 4.76 as of today that's here. What this site also does is it breaks down the data by census tracts. There's 11 census areas within Santa Barbara County. This gray line that has the numbers attributed to it is the city of Santa Maria. And we've had the highest case rate ever since they've been publishing this until recently. See, this purple line is Isla Vista. And so this has been the concern, right? UCSB back in campus. We're getting to Halloween, maintaining the physical distancing is starting to show a little increase in that area. But these are the numbers for Santa Maria, and then each of these other graph lines represents a different area. This black line is important to note because it shows those positive cases that are still pending to be applied to a census area.
Whoever county
Right.
or whatever city they're from.
Yep, so they got the positive rate back, they haven't assigned it yet, and so this data changes on a daily basis. This 45 is the current number of daily cases reported within that 7 days span from the 20th back to the 14th in Santa Maria. Yesterday, that said 37 for that same date. So there were more cases along this black line that as they made contact and tracked back up the string, they were able to apply to a census area. And so that's an important piece of information. So I've been going in and tracking that data on a daily basis. And it shows up here in this next, this local case data tracking that I've been doing. I've actually been doing it for City of Santa Maria, for Orchid, and for Guadalupe, because we meet as those 4 districts along with the high school district, and we're evaluating that local area, knowing that the kids from those other 3 elementary districts all feed into the high school district. So we've got to be consistent with what how we're approaching this across the valley. And so this is a comparison of those daily rates directly from the county website. So that's not a numerical match to what's on the state website, because the county is continuing to assign outside of that 7-day window. And what is highlighted in these are the actual reporting dates. So on the 26th, which was the data that was reported as October 6th on the state site, the statewide, the countywide daily case rate was 6.64 per 100,000 population. For Santa Maria, it was 12.63 for the Santa Maria census map. That's primarily the city of Santa Maria. And so I've got that captured in this next slide here. This is what I shared in my comments at the end of the board meeting last week, just because that red had been, we ascended to red or in a countywide. And so I shared this late in the meeting the other day. And so that was going back, that was on the 14th. So the reporting date was the 13th. So actually on the 3rd, the countywide rate was 4.57. The Santa Maria rate was 9.57 daily cases per 100,000 population. So this is what I shared 2 weeks ago. This is where we are within the data that I was just showing you that's on the countywide screen currently. As of the 10th, which was the data that was reported on the 20th, the county had grown a little bit over that time to 5.26. Santa Maria was at 8.04. But on the day that was reported this past Tuesday, or yesterday on the 27th, back to the 17th, the countywide rate was at 4.88 new daily cases per 100,000. Santa Maria had descended to 6.03. Okay, so that's the first time that Santa Maria as an entity has dropped out of that purple tier. And so again, to look at, this is what the map shows for the county. That's just, I cut and pasted that 4-week cycle. And this is similarly what the city of Santa Maria looks like over that time frame. So this is the first reporting cycle where Santa Maria has been red. So what we've been following, the conversations we've been having is just to follow that same protocol with locally. So next week, if we continue within red, so that would be the data that's reported on the 3rd of November. That's actually the 17th. So the 3rd of November will actually be back to the 24th. right? Which we'll get that data next Monday. I'm sorry, on Saturday.
Yeah.
Right. And then the following week will be the 10th. If we maintain that level, then we would consider initiating the return to in-person learning. If we can maintain that 3 weeks in a row. A lot of concern right now because what you saw in Isla Vista, we've been on these calls with County Public Health. They have indicated that, they know when schools reopen, as schools reopen and bring back more kids, we're probably going to see an increase in case rates. And when you look at what's going on across the country, there's some big increases going on. So again, my counsel to the board is we continue to track the data, continue to make sure that we're following the data, because this is a public health issue more than it is a return to in-person instruction issue. Okay. Any questions on that piece?
I personally appreciate seeing the data focused on our area of influence.
Yeah, and that's,
Santa Maria as a whole, and not through the whole county, just as a whole.
I've been serving on a task force with public health and county schools yesterday. We did a press conference yesterday, kicking off a new, it's not a new initiative, a different initiative to reinforce the public safety pieces, the personal responsibilities. It's called Masked and Mighty.
Yeah, I saw that.
Shared in the update.
Yeah.
A couple weeks ago, we had somebody from Cottage came up, and our elementary PE folks, we met over at Livin, and they took pictures of them. They're in the
Right.
ad campaign because we're really pushing, it's going to be incumbent upon everybody to adhere to those public safety or the public health guidelines, the hand washing, the physical distancing, the wearing the masks. And we're going into Halloween Saturday night, right? Thanksgiving in 3 weeks. So it's going to be a real challenge.
Flu season now.
Yeah.
I think that's, and I'm like Mrs. Cordero, I appreciate the information, because the other thing is we tend to look at boundaries like a county as a definitive line, and then whatever happens in there is universal. Doesn't happen in the next county, so I think there's the blendedness of this is important to understand, as well as the focal nature of some of those groups who are most affected. And I think that's, like you said, with those 11 areas in the city of Santa Maria, that's something we need to be cognizant of, and not looking at 3 weeks of data to make an immediate change, because it's really about the health and what health trends are looking at.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we've got families and kids and teachers, safety. That's our duty.
That is number one in this whole thing. This, again, I've said this many times, this is a community public health issue first, right? And we've got to be a partner within that larger community to make sure that we're doing our part to contribute to safety and health of everyone, right? Because I don't know, back in March when we said we were going to close schools, the conversation was that we'll be back in a month, right? Here we are 8 months later, right? It's going to take a lot more work than just picking a day and saying this is going to be the day we're doing it. It's really going to be applying that science. So with that in mind, this notion of surveillance testing is an important part of that. And so while we're continuing to monitor the daily case rates, we've also begun making connections to get surveillance testing up and running. And so I want to, this is a link back to the safety, the reopening framework. This is one of the things that hasn't changed. So this is still dated July 17th. And this was at the very beginning of when Governor Newsom basically put the initial monitoring system in place that made the reopening of most schools at that point a non-starter. And so there's information in here. This is the in-person reopening criteria. And on this second page, and so I'm just going to read from this because I know it's hard to read on the small screens. How should schools think about testing? Once schools are reopened to at least some in-person instruction, it is recommended that surveillance testing be implemented based on the local disease trends. And knowing that our rates are higher than the remainder of the county rate, it's going to be imperative that we put some testing protocols in place. It's not going to be a preventive measure. Testing doesn't prevent, it allows us to be more responsive in the event and, you know, when and if there are some positive cases. So again, based on those local disease trends, if epidemiological data indicates concern for increasing community transmissions, schools should increase testing of staff to detect potential cases as lab testing capacity allows. That underlying part was just kind of an abstract thought back in July. It's very real for us as we have worked with public health and some of these labs. We're a big entity. We've got a lot of adults and we're only talking about surveillance testing for the adults. We got a lot of adults in our system. So it's taken, and I want to give Matt Beecher credit. I don't see Matt on the screen because my pictures went away, but I believe he's on with us tonight. He and Sean Chenoweth have been working with these labs, really getting some protocols in place. And so who should be tested and how often? School staff are essential workers, and staff includes teachers, paraprofessionals, cafeteria workers, janitors, bus drivers. And even though bus drivers aren't our employees, and I'll reference this later, we have included STA in these conversations, knowing that when we consider and begin to bring back cohorts, we'll need to access transportation services. So we've included them in that consideration for testing. And any other school employee that may have contact with students or other staff. School districts and schools shall test periodically as testing capacity permits and as practicable. Examples of recommended frequency include testing all staff over 2 months, where 25% of staff are tested every 2 weeks, or 50% every month, to rotate testing of all staff over time. And so what we're talking about is for the foreseeable future, not just a one-time, but we're going to continue putting this cycle in place. And so that's really the direction behind surveillance testing. And so, and again, we've reached an agreement in principle with Quest Labs. It's an in-home nasal swab, would be mailable to employees at their home address, mailable back to the lab. It's not for those of us that have had the long Q-tip all the way to the back of the brain, it's not that test. It's just within the nasal cavity. Like many, Vita, you've mentioned many times, your daughter's employer is doing it 2 or 3 times a week, right? And yeah, test once a week. So for us, it'll be this cycle. And so all employees will be tested within that 2-month cycle. We've got that agreement in principle. We're working through the details at this point to get it up and running as soon as possible. We get notified of negative results. County Public Health gets notified of negative results for contact tracing. I'm sorry. I'd say it positive. I should have said, we always think of a negative result being the positive is the result. The positive is the individual with recommendation to go to their doctor and quarantine and do all the things according to the health and safety protocols. And so I'm going to come back to that in a second when we talk about communication. So if you have some other questions, I may address them here in a minute. And so the surveillance testing is really kind of the base, the foundation upon which any consideration is built. That's the best thing for our community anyway. And I'll reference in a minute. I've been meeting twice a week with Jose, who's on the line, Jose Segura from SMEA, and Matt Harris, and we'll talk. And I'll share with you a communication that went out. I think it was either over the weekend or it might have been Monday, just to get folks cued in that this is coming, this is in the works. So when we talk about targeted group considerations for in-person instruction, which students can be served in cohorts, and this is how we're talking about beginning, as I mentioned back in September, starting with small groups. The determinations made at the LEA, the local educational agency, and school level based on the needs of students. Students with disabilities should be prioritized by the LEA and school for receiving targeted supports and services. In addition, English learners, students at higher risk of further learning loss or not participating in distance learning, students at risk, that 3 shouldn't be there, at risk of abuse or neglect, foster youth, and students experiencing homelessness may also be prioritized. So for our purposes, this is where we are in identifying those targeted groups. Based on that, that paragraph that I just read came out of the California Department of Public Health reopening guidance that was published back in the summer. We're starting with students' abilities with disabilities prioritized. And for us, that means, again, those moderate to severe SDC and the TLP programs. Rationale for that is that's the smallest group of students, and there's a larger impact on transportation with that group. And so it's almost like building a high school master schedule. You got to start with the singletons first, right? The pieces that require that have the least amount of flexibility. And so this is a target of about 122 students across 11 campuses to begin. Special education services has collected feedback from teachers, and I want to commend Jose. Jose actually met with SDC teachers, collected their questions, their concerns, their wonderings. We did the same thing with the site administrative teams. We put that data together, and regardless of group, the questions are primarily the same. And these are our most knowledgeable folks about the needs of our kids. So some really good data that special services have been operating from. Been contacting parents of students within those programs. Some parents have said, I'm not interested in bringing my child back to school at this point, which creates, as we design this, that's going to create, some other considerations, because it's not, having in-person versus distance with students with special needs. We're going to have to figure out what does that need to look like. And then Matt has been working with student transportation, the STA, on what that might look like for them to start building those routes. And so we come back to communication. Based on the data that Santa Maria has elevated to that red tier as a standalone at this point, I'm going to update the communication that went out to the community on the 16th to include that new data. There's going to be a follow-up communication to all SMBSD employees regarding surveillance testing. And this is where, again, I've mentioned Matt and Jose before. They've been critical in this piece. We had a conversation at LMC last week, and I'm going to share with you the joint communique. We met with CLMC, the classified group, today, but in her wisdom, Bijou from the LMC group asked that we get his eyes on the LMC joint communication, because even though we meet separately, this is something that's got to be that we're all in on. And so even though we've got this, these lags in times that we meet, Matt got his eyes on the communication, gave it a thumbs up. We met and had that conversation back with CLMC today. And so I just want to share, this is the joint communique that went out, and Jose sent this out, I believe, on, even though it's dated the 21st, I don't even remember what day, we met on the 21st. I think he sent it out over the weekend. Are you on, Jose? Can you tell me when you sent that out? Can you unmute yourself?
I sent it on Friday.
Friday. Okay, thanks. And so it's around these two issues, surveillance testing and cohorts. And so what it says is that in reference to surveillance testing, the question, will this be required of all employees, certificated and classified? And again, this is where we got Matt's eyes on this. And what do we do if members refuse to be tested? Does surveillance testing need to be negotiated, or impact or implementation was really the question. And so this is the communication that went out. Please stay tuned. The communication from myself, from Mr. Segura and Mr. Harris will be forthcoming shortly with regards to public health, both the county and state requirement to conduct surveillance testing of 100% of its employees every 8 weeks. At this time, a commitment has been made between the presidents of both labor associations and the superintendent to provide a communication that will delineate the process of surveillance testing as an interim safety requirement. and a responsibility of all employees of the Santa Maria Bonita School District. Members are also reminded of the safe return attestation, which will be linked with that communication. And again, we're still trying to get the details from Quest because we want to be able to include that. We haven't had all the information back yet, which outlines all those other protocols related to positive tests by staff and students. There's a county description of symptoms and how those get, what the necessary response is to those as well that will be included. And then relative to the cohorts, all parties involved in generating the cohorts will continue to communicate with each other. Any part of the plan different from what we're currently doing will be discussed, analyzed, measured, and bargained as needed. And so the commitment, and so consideration for bringing back small cohorts onto site is in the investigative stage. We're still collecting that data. There are a lot of factors which need to be considered, including receiving input from various parents. Once all information is gathered and considered and prior to returning, there will be a communication to all stakeholders informing them of the process, which will be followed in the rationale for said process. And again, it's contingent upon tracking those, the daily case rates. Okay, because we don't want to get something started that's going to have a negative impact. We want to make sure that we're doing this expeditiously. You know, a lot of districts have already identified a date. We're going to return on January 15th. I'm not a big fan of that. I understand why why there's a need to do that, but I hate to just put something out there that's arbitrary. That if things get worse, then what? Right? And so this is, again, and this is as a study session. Any questions, concerns will be where we'll wind up with this conversation, because I want to get your input, information that you feel like you need as a board, because we'll be coming back to a board meeting here within the next few weeks with the update on that data. And again, we're not meeting on the 11th, which is 2 weeks from today. That's a holiday. So we've got an extra week built in there. And that'll give us a bigger slice of what the data is looking like. And then we're initiating MOUs. Again, we met with CLMC today. We had scheduled a time to meet on Monday to really start fleshing that out. And again, Matt and Jose, when I met with them yesterday morning, and we're meeting again tomorrow, both felt like we need to start having this conversation now, right? Based on the data we know now, because, you know, what we learned in March is we were just trying to get out the door. And there were a lot, and when we thought we were taking everything into consideration, and we found, you know, that there are some elements that we were really silent on, and we've had to figure it out. And so we want to make sure we're getting it front loading as much information as possible. And so we'll be working through those specifics, and again, working through that with the employee groups, and then bringing it back to the board for approval as well. So now, that's what I got. Those are the kind of the big rocks around this whole, you know, uncharted territory that we're traversing. Questions, concerns, considerations that we haven't thought of, that you might be hearing of from other groups that needs to be part of it.
My question, I keep going back, and I know it's not required that employees be tested at this point, but
Sorry. But I can't help but wonder why, or have teachers on their own gone to be tested? And is there any way of I'm not concerned about the results. I'm just thinking about myself personally. If I knew that I were going to be returning to my work site to work, even if it's only a couple of days a week, would I want to know, am I healthy? I want to make sure in my mind that I don't have COVID. So, you know, I trot myself over to the fair park and make that little appointment, and it, you know, takes about 5 minutes, and just for my own sense of well-being. Do we have any indication from any of our employees that they have done that?
I mean, have we asked for that information? No. Have we been notified when folks have tested, received a positive result? Yes.
Okay.
And there's nothing that precludes anyone from doing that. I mean, I've been tested.
Right.
The commitment from the surveillance testing within the school reopening guidelines, again, is thinking of the larger community.
Right.
Or we put the process in place. So there's nothing that would preclude anyone from taking it upon themselves to get tested more often if they chose to.
Is there any resistance to the surveillance testing?
Well, again, this is I can speak for Matt and Jose. As we've explored this, Matt Harrison, Jose Segura, we're on board that this is the right thing to do. Are there going to be people that are resistant? Absolutely, right? But this is bigger than any individual. This is our commitment, and that's the communication that we will send out. It's going to reinforce that notion, right? Because it's not just me or my folks in my building pod. This is across the larger community, and for us, across multiple counties, right? Because we got a lot of people that live in San Luis County.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is, and this is why I'm bringing this to the board, right? Our obligation as partners in this county, this community, is to be doing everything we can. And that's really the expectation for surveillance testing, because if we're not, what we're hearing across the country is there's just not enough testing that's going on, right? It is I think I'm sick testing versus let's get a little lead on this.
Right.
County Public Health, again, has provided us with they don't have the capacity to do the surveillance testing, but they have been vetting all of these different labs and again, I want to give credit to Matt and Sean. They've been doing most of the pick and shovel work on finding somebody who can fit the scope and size of our district and provide the results in a timely fashion. So public health has been vetting those folks. And so, it's been difficult for us. The districts that have opened with 30, 40 employees, it's pretty simple.
Right.
But we're talking about, over 2,000 employees. That's a big slice. So,
yeah.
So, always operating from good intentions. I want to believe that, 99% of people across the country, if they felt like this, this is going to help us, then why wouldn't I do it? And there's going to be some that are going to say no, and we'll deal with those on a one-on-one rather than, wonder about, start with it.
Okay.
Other questions, concerns, observations, considerations, holes that you see in how we're proceeding?
No, I mean, for me, the concern, I think, was, as I just, illustrated earlier, was that we not be too quick to make any transitions. I appreciate not making a specific commitment to a date. And I think in part because of some of the lack of predictability that you showed or discussed too, in where kids have gone back to school, how that changes that rate. Because I think that we want to mitigate any learning loss that's there. That's first and foremost as far as the school, as from our educational aspect. But we also don't want to put the stress not only of an unsafe situation to our families and our teachers and our kids, but we also don't want to put upon them, yeah, we went back, now our positivity rate has gone up, and so we're going to walk it back to make yet another change. I think we want to be really thoughtful in how we make that transition. Nothing is assured, obviously, very, very much so, if we've learned anything. But at the same time, we want to be thoughtful and have as many people able to participate willingly and wanting to, and then not also make that too quick so that we have to redirect yet again. I think we want to try and make things as best we can without knowing the future to mitigate any of those changes and make people feel good about the direction they're being asked to go. And I agree with you, and I think for me, and I was going back on campus, if there's not a requirement to be negative to be back on the campus, I would still want to do that for my knowledge and my cohort's knowledge prior to entering into that 2-month cycle. So I think that's one of those things where Jose and Matt are going to be really helpful in encouraging their constituents to be that kind of thoughtful. At any rate, that's that's my main consideration or concern is expediting or moving into things too quickly and not going back.
Right. Yeah, we want to do it right, do it once, and not. Yeah. And I appreciate what you said, John, about uncertainty. The only thing that's certain right now is that there's uncertainty coming, and we'll continue to operate as much as we can in a strategic manner. Amen. So that's all I got.
Well, thank you. No, it's I think that again, just as you said, because there's that lag and because we need that, because those things are changing all the time, the more updated we are and the more on, and that's the other reason I wanted to ask about the website, because I think it's, whatever teachers or admin are part of the meeting tonight, they can see, look, I can access this and keep abreast of some of those things and keep up as best I can.
And we put those links in the prior communication, and we'll continue to put them in the subsequent communications as well.
Right.
Those should really even be on our website.
It is. Yeah.
So some of like every week that we all have COVID.
Mm-hmm. And I'll, again, on the weekly, although I've been trying to update all of you, that link is there. I get on it just every day, almost like checking box scores used to be for baseball. It's populating that data because we're all using it on that regional level as well.
Thank you. All right, so
Thank you.
if there's no other discussion, then we can move on to 6B, NWEA assessment overview. And it looks like Nicole, are you here for that with your new hair?
I'll get us
And I
started.
think This is going to take it as a kickoff.
Who's kicking off? The Rams? What?
Thought we were still at Dodgers. All right. So good evening, board members and superintendent and stakeholders who are listening tonight. Before we start the presentation, I did want to just give a little context. In the agenda, the item is actually named NWEA Assessment Overview. This is actually a presentation of our entire assessment system. Part of that system, as you will hear tonight, is a district benchmark assessment. That is the NWEA platform that you've heard about. But we wanted to ensure that folks who have, all these many questions knew that we were going to be talking about it tonight so that they would have the opportunity to tune in and hear the information that maybe they haven't heard yet or that they're seeking. So in the future, this would have been titled, right, District Assessment System. But we really wanted to call attention to that just because there's been a lot of questions. We want to make sure people could tune in. Okay. So with that, I will introduce Ms. Wiseman from School Support and Assessment and Accountability Department.
Good evening, board members, Superintendent Ontiveros, and Cabinet. Tonight, we'll be sharing information around our district assessment system. Thank you to our district assessment and accountability team for the efforts they have put in to begin to create systems and structures to align the work you will hear about tonight. I'm not sharing my screen. I apologize. I was so excited. There we go. So as educators, we ask ourselves, crazy. busy here. As educators, we ask ourselves, what do we want students to know and be able to do? Our answer is to ensure that our students are able to master grade level standards in support of their success the day after they graduate and beyond. We are committed to preparing successful citizens who are college and career ready. As evidenced by our bold stand, all students will move a minimum of a grade level each year through effective Tier 1 practices. We'll do that through our key driver number 4, an aligned instructional system. An aligned instructional system includes a written curriculum, one that is specifically aligned to standards. This curriculum is the actual curriculum that is taught. As a result, when students are assessed with a standards aligned assessment tool, the data gathered is both meaningful and useful. Research tells us the impact of good first teaching in Tier 1 should result in about 80 to 85% of students achieving mastery at standard or making adequate growth. Our assessments provide us information on if our students are making a minimum of a year's growth and or progressing towards standard mastery. We're going to actually kind of dig into this piece of the triangle and really talk about assessment within our district tonight. Classroom assessments or common formative assessments are ongoing. They happen all year at the classroom and site level. And these assessments are done by teachers in conjunction with site PLCs to monitor student progress on grade level content and to support one another in teaching strategies. They support a teacher, a grade level, and or a department in modifying and adjusting their instruction on a daily, sometimes even hourly basis. These are daily tasks and assignments that are observed or collected by the teacher to know progress of individual students, the impact of instruction, and the needs for differentiation. Some of the standards aligned assessments are listed here that teachers have available. The next piece of our standards aligned assessments are our state assessments. These are required to give by the state of California. The state tells us what we're giving, to who we are giving the assessments, and when we administer those assessments. Most state assessments fall during a window in the spring between February and May. You'll see here identified the 2 assessments that have the largest group of students that are impacted. Below, you'll see all of the required state assessments from our PFT to our science test to our California alternative assessment. Where we really want to spend some time tonight is digging into the level around district benchmarks. District benchmarks are designed to provide information on how we're doing in ensuring student growth and progress towards standards mastery. It is our responsibility to ensure that students are progressing a minimum of 1 year in our charge. Additionally, these assessments provide critical progress monitoring data for our LCAPs and SIPSAs, as well as information that helps determine professional learning for staff. This is a list of our current district assessments. We're going to spend some time tonight focusing on the NWEA. It is administered 3 times per year, and it was chosen to fill a gap in our assessment system. It will allow us to see the growth of a student as they move through our system from kindergarten through 8th grade. Why NWEA? We're going to spend some time digging into this right now. And we're going to start with our assessment coalition. At the beginning of the last school year, we asked for volunteers from the district to come together and be a part of our assessment coalition. This is a picture of that fantastic group. It was a majority of teachers, 2 site administrators, and 2 district administrators that were facilitating the group. Lori Grock sat as a site administrator on that committee last year, and I'm pleased to announce that Mrs. Grock, who is a principal on special assignment with our department, Assessment and Accountability, is with us tonight to share with you the work of the Assessment Coalition.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to talk to you tonight about the assessment systems that we have put into place and to answer any questions that you have. The Assessment Coalition was, in fact, a group of really dedicated volunteers from across the district, all grade levels, and many of our sites were there and represented. And we tasked them with choosing an assessment that would work for all of the needs of the district. So when we met with the Assessment Coalition, we talked to them about what their purpose was in our district and how they could align to the key driver of an instructional system. We also had some really difficult conversations about the current reality as of last year in this district and the proliferation of different assessments that were available to teachers and being used in multiple ways, to the extent that we were not able to pull strong pieces of data for students across our system. And what I mean by that is a student at Miller might have a different set of data points than a student at Adam. And we really want to be able to talk about our students as a whole so that we can align their needs to the district's products and services. So we audited the current assessment system based on what we need to know about students. And this was our reality. All of those green and yellow dates were dates that students were being tested in our system for district assessments. And we looked at that and said, this doesn't work. We have to minimize the intrusion on classroom instruction and maximize the power of the data that we collected. So the Assessment Coalition completely saw the need for an aligned instructional system. And then we started talking about what is it that we need that instructional system to do. So it's important to note, we did not start with the end in mind. We did not start with NWEA and say, how do we make this fit what we're doing? Or how do we change what we're doing to fit this assessment? What we said was, let's look at all of the assessments that are available and let's talk about what we need from an aligned instructional system. And this is the list that the coalition came up with. These were all of the things that we desired in one assessment system. Of course, we wanted it to be standards aligned. We definitely wanted it to be nationally normed. We wanted validity to the state assessments in SBAC. We wanted to be able to track growth over time for individual students, classes, grades, schools, and the district. We would like it to be available in English and Spanish for those students in our DLI programs. We wanted it to be an adaptive assessment, not a static assessment for students, meaning that it adapted to the answers that the student gave. We wanted a language acquisition component. We wanted to cover all of our grade spans. We needed teacher reports, parent reports. We wanted additional assessments that we could consider as needed. We definitely wanted it to be computer-based. It needed to be compatible with our school data platform, School City, and we wanted a science assessment. So we looked at lots of assessments across the country. We looked at all of our neighboring districts and asked what they were doing and looked into each of those assessments as well. And what we came to was one assessment that met almost all of our needs, and that was NWEA. So the yellow check marks show all of the criteria that NWEA meets, and it was by far the one assessment platform that met most of our needs. So we piloted that platform. We piloted it for 5 months with our Assessment Coalition members, which was something unique to NWEA. They don't normally pilot any of their platforms. You buy in or you don't. But our Assessment Coalition really advocated as teachers that they needed to make this decision with the end in mind and really understanding the commitment that they were making. And so NWEA complied with that for us and allowed us to pilot the platform for 5 months. So our new SMBSD benchmark assessment is the NWEA MAP growth. And the MAP growth assesses 3 content areas. It assesses reading for kindergarten through 8th grade, math for kindergarten through 8th grade, and science for 7th and 8th grade. And the Assessment Coalition advocated for this, and that's the decision that we chose to go with. So let's talk about NWEA map growth. The map growth assessment is designed to measure growth over time. It's adaptive, meaning that it adjusts to the student's performance. The growth test results are returned immediately, which is very different from our CASP results, as you know. The map growth is highly aligned to the Smarter Summative Assessment and gives predictions based on students' scores and growth over time. The map growth can predict what the student will score on the SBAC in the spring. It also provides a very family-friendly parent report, which was something that was incredibly crucial to us. It allows teachers to track student progress over the year to show that growth for students. It also is very useful in identifying trends for professional learning. So there are pieces of the program analytics that allow us to see where we are not meeting student need in instruction and how to beef that up. And it provides information to all stakeholders on how students are progressing on meeting the standards in relationship to national trends. And this was, again, very important to us. We want to be the best in Santa Maria Valley, but we want an accurate and valid yardstick of measure to the national norm. We want to be the best that there is anywhere, not just in the city limits. So it was very important to us that it be nationally normed and identify national trends. So we're going to talk now a little bit about what map growth provides and how these reports look. And one of the key pieces of vocabulary that anyone discussing NWEA needs to understand is a RIT score. So RIT stands for the RASH unit score, and it is a stable equal interval score. And the analogy that I like to draw for the RIT score is it's very similar to when you take your children to the pediatrician. So we all, if we've had children and taken them to the pediatrician, we know that there are growth scores and charts, and the pediatrician can tell you on any given day what your child weighs and how tall they are and how that relates to the national expectations for a child that age. That's why the RIT is so important, because in the RIT score from kindergarten to 12th grade, a point is a point and it doesn't change. So 10 points of growth, whether it's 10 points that a kindergartner made or an 8th grader made, those are equivalent. And that allows us to compare students to themselves and to others in a way that SBAC really has never allowed us to do. So basically the RIT score is a number that's given at the end of each test that's assigned. So as you know, there's the 3 areas, reading, math, and science for 7th and 8th grade. Students will receive a RIT score for each of the tests that they take. There is no max or perfect RIT score, but it is usually expressed on a scale of 100 to 350. So you would expect a kindergartner to be in the 100 to maybe 110, 120 range. You would hope that a senior in high school is up in the 350s because they're ready to graduate. The score represents the student's achievement level at any given moment, but it does also help measure academic growth over time. Because the data is collected each time a student takes the assessment, we can see how the student has grown from one testing period to another, from one year to another. The RIT score is independent of grade level or age. Because the test is adaptive, the student gets harder questions when they get the answer right, and they get easier questions if they get an answer wrong. And so it's not dependent upon grade level or age. This allows for direct comparisons of the student to other students and the student to themselves over time. So NWEA provides for us normative data on a national scale. This normative data is very valid and very accurate, and it tells us the mean score, the 50th percentile for students across the country. So there's been a lot of discussion about the validity of testing in a COVID environment and an online platform. It's important to note that during the school closures from March to June, NWEA did test over 400,000 students nationwide. And they did a linking study between those test scores and the previous test scores that they had for those students and for other students at that time of the year in previous years. And they found that they were statistically valid and reliable, even given the at-home platform. This year, this fall, NWEA will test over 10 million students, and we are some of those 10 million. So you can see that we get charts for reading and then also for math and science that tells us where students are scoring. NWEA also provides growth expectations based on the national mean and a projection of the SBAC validity. So there's a link at the bottom of this slide that shows how students, based on their current score in the fall, you can track the RIT score they received to what their expected performance on the SBAC in the spring is for each grade and for each subject area. Very helpful to us to be able to predict how our students will do and to see what our students need to do better. As I said, one of the priorities of the coalition, the assessment coalition, was that there be a family report. We know that assessment is critical to teachers, but we also need to be able to communicate with parents as partners in this work. And so the family report was really one of the really beneficial factors that made NWEA such an outstanding candidate to the members of the assessment coalition. So the family report, you see a sample family report on your screen. The family report gives families 3 critical pieces of information. The first is achievement. So we all know when we go to a parent conference, the question that they ask is, how is my child doing? And so we want to be able to tell them how their child is doing compared to similar students. So the family report references how the child is doing compared to similar students. And similar students is defined as students with the same starting RIT in the same grade and with the equivalent weeks of instruction at the time of testing. So we have that piece of information as well as the national average. It also tells the family about the growth of the student. We're able to measure a child's progress over time, as you can see from the chart. This sample family report would be for a student who has tested 4 times and has the growth data to show on the chart. And then, as I mentioned before, the predictive factor of NWEA on the SBAC in the spring. So we're going to drill down a little bit and show you a close-up of part of this report. We're going to look at Christopher's reading. So this is Christopher's reading. This is exactly what the family would see. We can see that Christopher's overall RIT score was 198. We can see that this is 4 assessments worth of data going all the way back to the fall of 2018. And we can chart his progress as well as the dotted line progress of the national average. We can also see that his score on this assessment at this time was 198. And then finally, we can see that Christopher is likely to be scoring a basic on the Ohio state test if taken in the spring of 2020. Of course, for us, our report will tell how they are doing on the SBAC in the spring. At the November 18th board meeting, we will come back to you with the actual data from our fall administration. We're super excited to dig down in and see how our students did. And with that, I would entertain any questions that you have or toss it back to Nicole.
Before we go to any questions, I did want to just say that we just fully received access to our data both through the NWEA platform as well as having had it uploaded into School City. And so we're really starting to begin to dig down deep and analyze the data. We're excited. As with any new assessment, we're looking at many factors across the data, including the average time completion for our students by grade level. Additionally, we've had some initial glances and we are seeing some correlation between our last SBAC scores in spring of 2019 and the baseline data that we just, that our students just took in spring of 2019. So we're looking forward to diving deep and being able to bring some of that data back to you at the November 18th board meeting. Questions for us or our team?
I see Linda's hand up.
Yes, I have a couple. In the listing of the criteria that you were looking for that NWEA met, you had a check that it did include a Spanish component?
Yes, that's correct. So the test is offered in Spanish in all of the subjects. Our DLI students at Jimenez are taking those tests and we have those scores. And then we also are considering and using the Spanish assessments for some of our newcomers across the district, working with the ELD coaches to identify the appropriate candidates for those tests.
Okay, do the reports also come in Spanish?
Wah, wah. That is something that we have escalated to NWEA several times, that we would like the report to print in Spanish, and it's something that they have in the works now. As it stands, we have a Spanish companion. So the parent report prints in English and the companion prints in Spanish to guide the parents where to look on the report. But we anticipate by the end of the year that those reports will print in Spanish.
And it also, if I remember correctly, there was an ELD component that you were looking for in the testing?
Yes, ELD was, well, what we called it was language acquisition comparison. And then the NWEA suite does include a language acquisition component. We have not rolled that out yet. We wanted to take it in a little bit smaller steps, but it is available in the suite. The only check mark that NWEA did not get on that list was the writing component.
Right.
That's our district writing assessment. We're currently using our district writing assessment, but NWEA is also working on creating a writing component.
And while the sample that you shared with us showed language arts, math, and science, we, meaning Santa Maria, will only be doing math and language arts in K through 6. Science will only be for 7 and 8. Is that correct?
That's correct. Nicole, do you want to answer that for 5th grade?
Yeah, so currently we were only doing the science in 7th and 8th. That was a request by the Assessment Coalition, I believe, and Lori can speak to that. We will later go in and talk about bringing in the NWE or the science component for our elementary as we roll out more of the standards and have a deeper understanding down in our elementary schools.
The thinking with the science board member was that an elementary teacher is delivering the math and the ELA. If we added the science, they would also be delivering the science, where in junior high, which is subject specific, a math teacher is doing the math, the ELA teacher, and then this allows the science teacher to do the science assessment. So it was 100% their decision on where we decided to do the science. We even put the option out, do we not do the science yet? Would it be too much? And we had folks from junior high on that team as well, and their the group's guidance was that they wanted to do it in junior high, and then we would reconvene at some point to see when we wanted to start moving science into other grades, when we would be ready for that.
And I would add to that, that we've had multiple teachers and schools reach out wanting to know if they could participate with the science down in elementary.
Okay, and my other question is related to this information coming now, and we were not really informed of the coalition or anything other than an announcement that NWEA was going to be used. That doesn't seem to be in alignment with how we've made other changes in our assessments. I know most which we developed ourselves.
So I believe we did share this in the spring with the board. I think it was me that shared this in the spring. We also shared it with our CNI team. We sent direct emails to teachers. We did presentations. Anything we could do to get all of the work of the Assessment Coalition out and communicated in a number of ways for folks along the way so that they would have updates on the work that was happening. And we've continued to communicate this year almost weekly in the TNL newsletters, and again with principals, and again with coaches and any other groups that we can get in front of.
And I'm sort of referencing the letter that Mr. Ontiveros read regarding the glitches with the technology that occurred with this initial assessment period. I'm assuming that those will not be the norm as we progress in the future.
I would speak to when we started our SBAC testing and the amount of glitching we had with the brand new technology and just learning to use it, and the amount of time that very first year, there was kind of a cognitive load and shift as we learned how to use that. And I see a lot of similarities in what happened this go round. Is there's a learning curve as students are learning to log on, teachers are using the technology, and I would anticipate not seeing the same as we move into the winter testing session. We did a lot of learning, right? And we worked together collaboratively, and we got through the tough times.
Nicole, I have, or Lori, whomever, and I think maybe this is Lori, you had shown a graph of all the different tests that were, or maybe it was you, Nicole, that were on the previous schedule or calendar. And so I was thinking that something that might be effective for us to see is how you went past it with all the yellow and green. Yeah, how the administration of this test would help to remedy some of that scheduling and whatnot. And then also I just was curious in that same vein, I think you said that it fills a gap as to something that we either no longer do or needed. I'm not sure what gap that was that it filled. And that's probably just me not knowing.
So, John, Board Member Hollingshead, this slide right here, when you see these 4 assessments that are
Right.
district assessments, this used to list out about probably 20 to 30 different assessments that students were taking, and if they were an English learner, they might be taking multiple different assessments. And so what this did, this NWEA, is it allowed us to bring it down to 1 assessment plus our writing. And then our
Sure.
PKs and our TKs needed something that met their needs. So
Right.
there's that piece. And then the second piece that you talked about, the gap was that we had teacher created, system created assessments that didn't allow us to see a student's growth over time. because they were very discrete skills. And so what the hole that this fills is that it allows us to see how a student is making progress and growth every year in their tenure in our system.
Well, that's awesome. So I guess then maybe this is a little too detailed a question, but it seems like you're using it as a formative assessment to kind of to inform the teachers as to progress, but also to direct, at least it sounded like, direct where some weaknesses or things that the student can work on exist. Is that correct? Or are those inferences not made?
It will do that. It provides a teacher a report that tells exactly where a student is in reference to grade level standard, so that they know how to scaffold up to close that gap and get a student accessing grade level content. So it provides that piece of information. I think that's what you might be asking.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. I was trying to differentiate whether it was comparative or whether it was, the comparative, like you said, and Lori said, to a norm, rather than something that's as formative would inform some of the nuances or the finer things that the student who was at a certain level could use for that scaffolding. And that's just, it sounds like that's we have these amazing teachers that's part of their daily assessment and their acumen to figure maybe that out. Is that the case?
I would agree. And I think the power of this assessment is that it does let us know how our students across our system are doing, because the assessment is the same and it's measured and normed the same. So whether you're in kindergarten through 8th grade, we have an idea of how a student is performing. That's one piece, but I also believe that the power is for the teacher to be able to know exactly, in alignment on a rigorous, standard aligned, nationally normed test, how their students are doing in comparison to the standard. So the ability to be able to really know, this is where my student is, this is how far my student needs to go to get to standard. Now I have some information that helps me inform as a team, right, what we need to do to move our students forward and accelerate their growth.
Right. Well, and so then the nature of that, is it the map nature of it that as they answer the questions correctly, that it gets harder? If they're missing something, it gets easier. I mean, how is that reflected outside of that raw score to either the teacher or to the kid or to the family, or is that important?
It is. It's very important. And so we talked tonight about the family report. There's a whole nother side to NWEA, which is the teacher reports. And so for each student and for the class as a whole, the teacher can access a list, not just of the standards, but the strands and the claims that each student is either ready to be introduced to,
Right.
ready to be reinforced, or can move on from. So at any given moment, a teacher can look at their curriculum and say, I'm ready to teach this. Who's ready? Who needs something to scaffold them to this readiness? And who has already mastered this and can get some enrichment? So there's a whole piece of teacher reports that we didn't discuss tonight, but that does exactly that. So John, you're right. It is both formative and summative assessment characteristics in one.
Well, yeah, and it sounds a little bit almost like it would, to a small degree anyway, kind of complement the pacing, in that you would be able to see whether really kind of delving out some of those small things to focus on was effective. So that's
Exactly.
pretty cool. Thank you.
Right, and our professional learning moving forward from our department will be helping teachers access that information as they use the pacing guide, so that they have the data to support the decisions that they're making.
Okay.
I think Vita had some questions.
I do have a question, and I know when you give an assessment for the first time, it's always, a building block of learning. How are you as an assessment team getting feedback from teachers as to how it went for them, any obstacles that they found? I mean, has there been dialogue with the teachers? Is it a survey? Do they do it in a site process? And I'm asking this because I know probably the staff development that's going to come down the line has to probably blend itself in so that as they look at pacing charts and they look at the assessment pieces for each individual student, then they have to then begin to align how they then, with this distance learning, break out into breakout groups to actually deliver the learning that has to be done for those students. And because I guess I sit on the other end and I am in a breakout group with grandkids and then I'm coming back in, I'm wondering, how is the teacher managing to assess everything that happened today and be ready for lessons? And it's a big question, but I think about those things as we sit here and talk about the program, the way, you know, I forgot the name of the team, the coalition.
Assessment Coalition.
Thank you. Came together. Are they going to meet again and help move through some of the, you know, just the little bridges that have to be crossed in order for the successes of our students, as well as successful teaching, happens with this assessment? Because assessment is a purposeful piece to our teaching when we are educating. But, you know, I just wondered how all of that happens for them, because it's a big learning curve for everyone. So I think my question was in there, unless I need to clarify it a little bit.
I think I got you. I've got you. So
Okay.
I think the first piece that you asked in that was, what was the feedback that is occurring? And I have to speak to the absolute amazingness of the assessment and accountability team, who were meeting on a daily basis as we worked through this. And they have a very dedicated team of site test coordinators who are reporting information back about what, you know, this was going wrong and we need help in this area. And what was happening was that team was taking notes, right, and cataloging all of the different issues so that we're able to be thinking forward to the winter testing session and how to address. Additionally, each of our sites have coaches, and they come together to meet on a weekly basis. I think it's a weekly basis, and they have a you know, they're bringing back information from their site. And so at one of our coaches meeting, they provided feedback to our department. So our department went in, they collected all that information on a Google Doc. So we've got all of this information. We're starting to catalog it in terms of those technical issues. So I think that was the first piece, right? How we get the feedback. And then the second thing I heard you asking about was, you know, if this report is differentiated, giving you all these different groups. We talked about those kids that might not be ready, those kids that are ready, and those kids, how do you manage breakout rooms, right? And part of the idea behind this is, here's the standard. This is where we want our kids to be. And for these kids, how do we scaffold up and have them access that grade level text? So while some breakout rooms may occur, we actually want to be able to provide scaffolds so kids are able to access grade level text. So what are we providing them? How are we meeting their needs and providing them differentiation to allow them to access that grade level? It might be a sentence starter, or it might be we're going to read the text to them and orally allow them to access that level of thinking that they don't need to be able to read it, right? So all of those things are part of one of the reports that we'll work with and that we'll roll out, which is called the Learning Continuum.
And then they have time to plan with their grade levels to do these kinds of things?
This will 100% support their PLC process. I'm going to speak to it as a former teacher who administered this assessment in my former district when like a long time ago when I was young. It was one of the most powerful pieces that shifted how our team looked at planning instruction, right? Because it gave us the information about where our students were. So when we looked at where our students were, where we needed them to be, and we started really having conversation about what would we do to accelerate the learning, we saw incredible growth for our kids. And I know that the data is not relevant here, but when our team worked on that, our math scores moved from 20% to 54% on CST, just by utilizing that to help guide and plan our instruction and to make our conversations really around the standard and tied to our curriculum.
Additional questions or discussion?
Did a lot of our kids get kicked out though, or was it just a fluke, or were there issues with testing at all?
Do you want me to take that one, Nicole?
Absolutely. You took all the calls.
Michelle and I did.
Oh, so there were calls.
There were quite a few issues with the platform that we identified early on and addressed through the IT department. So Brian Rieke was amazing in figuring out exactly what needed to happen and pushing that out to every district Chromebook for every student. The issue then became that students had to completely shut down their Chromebook and restart it before they could get that update. And
Yes.
that didn't happen as easily or as consistently as we had hoped that it would in the beginning. So yes, there were issues. I mean, it was a rocky road for a couple of days, but we learned a lot, and our students learned a lot, and our teachers did, and we became very adept at talking students through the process of completely shutting down and restarting. And by the end of the testing window, we were having far fewer students getting kicked off. There were still technology glitches and Wi-Fi concerns at specific households,
That's
but
daily.
that overarching issue was addressed early and then readdressed until we got it to stick.
Okay, thank you.
I think part of your problem, Lori, was that you were talking about Rocky Road instead of chocolate, just plain chocolate.
I know. We
Maybe
should
mint
never
chip.
done that.
Yeah.
Stick with the vanilla.
Yeah. But I digress.
A little bit.
Yeah, a little bit, a lot of it. Okay, so thank you guys for
Thank you.
illuminating that to us, as we've always or often discussed about the formative testing and helping us better serve our kids and families. I hope that's what this ends up doing. It sounds really neat, and I hope that as some of the concerns are expressed, we're able to help our teachers and continue and to accommodate all the demands of this and with the distance platform. So thank you guys so much.
Yes, thank you. Luke, just a question. Would it be possible to see the presentation on our Friday memo? Just so I just want to kind of read it one more time, just slowly. Thank you.
We'll put it in really small.
Oh, I saw Mr. Valencia blink, so I know his thing's not frozen. Oh, now thank you, sir. God, for a minute there, I thought it was frozen. All right, if we're done with that, we'll move on to item 6C, Santa Maria Elementary Education Association Local President Release Time Program, LPRTP, a grant update.
And I'll kick this off and hand it over to Jose, because this was really something. It was about 2 years ago at this point, I think in November of 2018, when we brought the MOU to the board after the NEA grant had been approved. Jose laid out kind of the objectives of the grant. And so the board asked for an update. it's probably something we should have done last year, but this COVID thing kind of got a little in the way. And so, being as we had this date scheduled, I asked Jose just to prepare kind of the update on where he is, and because this is the third year of the grant, the last year of the grant cycle, and so Jose's got some information to share, and then as a study session, available for questions and feedback. So, Mr. Segura, you're on.
Oh, hi everybody. Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. So what I've done is thinking about presenting today, I thought about my members as well and realized that I really should be providing an update to them, right? Because as association president, I serve, them. And so what I've done is I put together a video, and Brian Reiki, he's going to help me out. He's going to run it. And so this is a video presentation that I put together for you all, but I'm also going to post it and share it for my members to watch as well, so that everybody kind of gets the same information at the same time, the same way. So Mr. Reiki, if you could, please. Hey everybody, it's me, Jose Segura. Welcome to a special episode of Fireside Chat with the President. In this particular episode, we're going to just focus on the President's release. And so this is also going to kind of be a twofer. This will be a report out to our membership, an update on what's happening, but it's also an update to the school board, because I presented a couple of years ago to the school board on this exact topic. And so this is a follow-up to that conversation. But I wanted all of our members to have access to the same information, which is why I'm doing it in this particular. So, like I said, a couple of years ago, I was here in front of the school board and I presented this document right here. And we talked about the full-time president's release and what that might mean. For those of you who are not aware, prior to 2018-19 school year, I was a 50% president. So I was half-time in the classroom and half-time president. But the reality was I was half-time in the classroom and I was a full-time president. And we'll talk a little bit about what I learned over that experience, but it was definitely a challenge to do both those jobs at the same time. And so in the fall of 2018, we had received a grant through CTA, and that grant kicked in that fall. The grant provided additional dollars to CTA, to SMEA, to help backfill the cost of additional release for the president, my position. And so I moved from a 50% release president, and now since the fall of 2018, I've been a full-time release president. And so let's talk about what that meant. So back in 2018, it was really the focus was on the big projects. And if you look at our actual document to NEA, our actual application, we had to break our rationale for the application into 4 categories. And those categories were basically member engagement, community engagement, things like communication, and also membership in general, right? Retaining members, bringing members in, that kind of stuff. And it's something we worked really hard on over the last couple of years. At the end of each year of the grant program, I was required to complete an evaluation document. Myself and Andrew Oman, our CTA staff person, worked together on that. And so what I've done is I provided that document to both the board and the district's cabinet. So they should have both year 1 and year 2 evaluation documents, so you get an idea of what our objectives and goals were, how have we progressed towards those objectives and goals, have there been any changes or modifications as circumstances have changed. And so that's a really good overall summary document of where we were, where we are, and where we hope to be, right? And so what's really nice about the main 4 objectives in our grant document was that they were not one and done type events. They were ongoing, evolving type projects. So we look at something like member engagement. Well, you're never done engaging with members. You can intensify, increase, ramp up your member engagement programs. You can find new and interesting ways to engage with members, but member engagement is a constant. It's always going to be there. And so there's the evaluation documents that the district, the cabinet, and the school board have access to. All right. And so let's talk about what we've learned since fall of 2018, right? There's been a lot going on since then. And we know that last spring, the pandemic hit and our schools closed for in-person instruction, and we're still in that distance learning model. But stuff happened even before that. And so let's take a look of what we've learned over the last couple of years, right? So first things first, it's not all about big projects, right? You tend to think about big projects as kind of the demand of your time, but big projects, they come and go. Big projects last for a year, they last for a month, it depends. But it's the day-to-day stuff. It's the everyday in and out, keeping the lights on and the wheels on the bus. That's really what's time consuming. And any of you who've ever run a small business or were a single, had your own business, you know that if you provide a service or a product, the more successful you become providing that service and that product, the less time you actually have to provide that service and product, because you're spending more time running the business. And it's no different with our union. Our union is an organization. Not only am I the president of SMEA, but technically I'm also the CEO, right? So it's my responsibility to run the organization, and that's just become more and more of a full-time job. And so that's something that's taken up a lot of time. Another thing I've learned over the last couple of years is that my students did not benefit from having a part-time president, part-time teacher. There are great part-time teachers out there who are doing fabulous work. But I wasn't just a 50% teacher sharing a job with another teacher. I was running the union full-time as well. So the full-time responsibilities were still there, even back in 2018. And so it was to the detriment of my students. And just so you know, at the time, when I was working half-time, I was in the classroom every day, half a day. That's how I felt was the best fit for me. But I understand now, and really kind of looking back and reflecting, that I wasn't as successful as an educator as I would hope to be or wanted to be. And so having the full-time release provides not only me with an opportunity to focus on the association, focus on being its CEO and its president and moving our organization forward, but it really helps those students who normally would have been in my job shared classroom to now just have a single teacher there all day long. A teacher who doesn't have their full-time job responsibility that kind of intertwines with the school and the class and the district. And so that's definitely a benefit not only to me as association president, but definitely a benefit to the students who would normally be in my classroom if I was sharing a job. And so that's important to talk about too. Also, what I've learned is that not only does this job and the day-to-days and the running of the organization dominate a lot of my time, but the more that we do, the more that I do for members, the more time it takes. And so I got to share this with you all. Mr. Ontiveros has said this to me often over the years that I've been president, that he's been in the district, and he is constantly reminding me, sharing with me that what he does and what I do are not so dissimilar, that we have a lot of the same demands on us in our work, and a lot of the things that we do are very similar. And to a certain extent, I agree with him, right? Now, I don't have any employees, nobody works for me, but a lot of the things that we do are very similar. And so I look at superintendent and association president, if we were a really small single school district, right, a one schoolhouse district with maybe 25 teachers, we'd have a superintendent. But chances are that superintendent would also be the principal, and they might even wear other hats as well. And so that superintendent would wear multiple hats trying to get everything done. And so opportunities, time, energy to be innovative, creative, and forward thinking are diminished. Would be the same with a local chapter president. I could be a local chapter president of a single school district where there's only 25 teachers. I'm the president. We got a vice president. We got a secretary and treasurer. So almost 20% of my membership is just running the executive board. We'd have to run every committee of the association. Plus, we'd be doing all the work that a lot of you do at your sites, right? Volunteering for things, running committees, doing book clubs and things like that. And so as the association president, I'd be wearing a lot of hats, right? Chances are I wouldn't have any release time because my time would be focused on all my work activities, school activities, and I'd be running the union on my own time outside the workday. Well, as associations and districts get bigger, the superintendent can wear fewer and fewer hats because the focus would be really on the superintendent's work. And it's the same thing for the president. So in a district our size, we're fortunate. We have a full-time superintendent that's his only responsibility. And it allows Mr. Ontiveros to be innovative, creative, forward-thinking, and to really look at the needs of our district and to kind of think about, how can he best bring his time and talent to the district in order to help students and staff and our district as a whole progress and move forward. And it's the same thing with me, right? So now I can focus on just those responsibilities. But Mrs. Oliver, a couple of years ago, back in November of 2018, asked a good question, right? And she asked about whether or not it would be time well spent to have a full-time president. And how would they know? And she didn't use the word guarantee, but how can the district be assured, or how could I assure the district that the time as a full-time release president would be time well spent? And really the answer then is the same answer now. But I can't put it in the context of this kind of a equivalency relationship that I have with the superintendent and the work that he does. A superintendent who is innovative, creative, and forward-thinking is going to be a superintendent that a board's going to want around for a long time. But there's nothing that requires them to be innovative, creative, or forward-thinking. There's nothing that requires them to think deep and long about some of the ways in which we can help students. They keep the wheels on the bus, they keep the lights on, all the paperwork and the documents get turned in on time. That could be a superintendent as well. But the board has control over who the superintendent is, and they can decide that this is someone who's not a right fit for their district. And the same thing is true for our union. A full-time release president can be as innovative, creative, or forward-thinking as they want to be or not, right? They could not do any of those things. And they could not be as beneficial to the association and to the students of the district as they could be. And that's up to the membership to decide whether or not they want to move on from that particular president and bring in somebody new. And so the power and the authority to determine whether or not I'm doing a job that's of value lies in the hands of my membership. Just like the power to determine whether or not a superintendent is doing the job that was hoped lies in the hands of the school board. And so that's an important piece that we learned over, the last couple of years. And so the full-time release presidency has been a benefit to my membership, especially during this time of COVID. We've put out 150 detailed, more production value oriented, kind of like this video, communication with our members just since March. That does include hundreds of communications with members about all kinds of things. And so just having the flexibility in my day to make sure that I'm communicating with folks and that we're moving forward. And these are just communications based on what's been happening since March. We're still moving forward with modernizing CNI. We're still moving forward with, bringing those teacher tutors on board, now that they're officially part of the association, and bargaining on their behalf. We're still moving forward with our member engagement projects like PD for Me. We're still moving forward with community engagement programs. We're establishing relationships with CAUSE and with Fund for Santa Barbara and Fighting Back Santa Maria and all these other local organizations that not only are here in our community, but they touch the lives of our students and our families. And so it's our best interest to have working relationships with these organizations so that we can help support each other and we can help move each other's initiatives forward and things like that. And so we're going to continue to do these things. It's been a great almost 2.25 years doing this. This is the last year of the grant. So come this June, the grant will no longer be funding us. SMEA is in a position to continue to financially support a full-time president beyond the years of the grant. We've already looked at projected budgets for the next few years, and we know that it's possible, and without having to pull back from some of the other opportunities that we provide our teachers. And so the full-time president's release, benefit to the district, absolutely. Benefit to students, just in the fact that the president isn't sharing their job and doing 100% president's work is a benefit to our students and a benefit to our association. Yes, absolutely. And those of you who reach out and communicate with me and have interactions with the work that we're doing, I think that you, or I hope that you would say that it's a benefit for our association as well. Okay, so at this point, school board, I'm open for questions.
And before we begin with questions, I apologize, I did receive those documents earlier today, but I was in a Zoom, so I forwarded them to you as we're sitting here, the evaluation documents that Jose alluded to. So they're in your email.
Did I speak at a church?
That's okay. That's okay. They didn't really add anything to what he was saying. I mean, they corroborated it, but they were also not, I think as Mr. Segura suggested when he started talking, most of it was directed towards what he's done for his members, not any of some of the things that we had talked about in the past. And so I think, if the floor is open for questions, it sounds like. Do you have any questions of Mr. Segura? Anybody?
Thank you. Good night.
Yeah. I think Mrs. Flores is trying to contemplate her query.
I guess the one thing that I would ask, you reference the day-to-day tasks. Other than, responding to emails or answering phone calls, what might some of those day-to-day tasks be?
That's a good question. Can you all hear me okay? My internet service at this time of night is always kind of spotty. But day-to-day tasks vary depending on the time of the year. So if we look at the very beginning of the year, is a good example. Beginning of the year is all about membership, making sure that we're connecting with all of the folks who are new to the district, enrolling them, answering their questions, getting information out to them. But it's also about connecting with all of the existing members to make sure that their data is updated, making sure that we have correct phone numbers and addresses for them. If they've changed work sites, have we updated that kind of stuff? And so these are the kind of things that you might have clerical staff for in a typical organization. We just don't have that, right? So those are the kind of things that I spend a lot of time working on. Organizing things like PD for Me. We got our PD for Me's up this year, but that required me to go out, recruit teachers who are interested in putting these events on, figuring out how we're going to make it happen, and make it any arrangements that we need to, whether it's a Zoom or we did a kayaking event, which was awesome. We wanted to make sure that we had access to kayaks and we could rent them. It's stuff like that. It's also really right now making trips to the office because it's closed just to collect the mail is a chore at this point. But the day-to-day stuff really varies depending on the time of the year. A lot of it has to do with providing information to members, gathering information, doing research. Members come to me with questions all the time, and I make sure that I provide them with accurate information, deciding whether or not I need to respond to an individual member or just something I should provide to my membership more broadly, something I should take to Rep Council, as it's a question for Mr. Ontiveros. And so it's kind of a constant churning of day-to-day stuff. That's not the big projects, right? It's the little everyday things that just take time.
Thank you.
Well, so the task at hand with what you had provided, the first report was to build and strengthen the association. How do you get feedback from your members that show that they are understanding the job that you're doing for them on building and strengthening the association? What kind of feedback do you look at so that as you move toward the goals of what the district is trying to do to strengthen the best outcome for our students, that you as a union have feedback from your teachers so that you can enhance and provide opportunities for them, so that as we move together toward building on a lot of the uncertainties that have happened, you have the ear, and maybe they have also had the opportunity as members to give you feedback so that you understand some of the things that members need on their behalf, since you are their president?
Yeah, it's a great question, Vita. One of the biggest tools for doing exactly what you just described is the representative council. I'm very fortunate that I've always had a very robust rep council throughout my entire presidency. And we meet monthly. We're talking about anywhere between 70 and 80 members at a time. Sorry, I'm in the garage door just opened. 70 to 80 members are what make up my rep council. And those are the connections to every site that I have and that the executive board of my executive board have. And we really utilize our representative council to connect with site teachers. That's one way we can bring concerns to us. A good example of that would be this need for more like social emotional support outlets for members, especially during this extremely stressful time. And so when I keep hearing this from my reps and they bringing it to me, I'm getting emails and text messages from teachers. Then we start looking at, well, what opportunities are out there? What it's already available that we can tap into and connect our folks to. And it just so happened that CTA was doing these series of SEL workshops and classes. And so we were able to plug our members into those types of programs and allow them to take advantage of that. And so Rep Council, like I said, is one really important way that I connect with my folks. Another way is folks connect with me directly. I am super available, and I try to answer emails with 24 hours or less, text messages within an hour or so. Now the garage door is closing. And there it is. Yes. Okay. So as you can tell, I'm not in the living room. So anyway, those are a couple of ways that we connect directly with members, making sure that we have a connection to them. And when there's new ways to do that, we'll look for that. We're really active on social media too, Vita, Ms. Flores. And so I don't go to social media to find out where all the problems are, but I do go into our social media accounts to find out what are the trends that I'm seeing and member concerns, things that members are enjoying, things that they want more of, things that they're frustrated with. And I use that to kind of circle back with folks to find out what can we as an association do to help support them.
And with the CNI piece, has anything been done?
Yes. So as you know, since we met in 2018, we are now on our third director of CNI, or teaching and learning, right? We had Mrs. Bolaños in 2018-19. We had Ms. Dutra last year, and now we have Ms. Loftus. And so all have been on board with moving forward to reimagine our CNI, but there has been some stops and stutters only because there's been changes in leadership, right? Last year was probably our most productive year with Ms. Dutra, only because we had the whole year with her, and we were really able to not only take a look at the existing structure, but figure out, well, how do these things work with each other? Where are there good uses of time and where are there not good uses of time? A good example of that would be our action teams. Action teams on paper are awesome, right? Curriculum area specific folks who really have a passion for math or science or English. But the problem is there's not always work for them. And so we have these inactive action teams constantly sitting around. And so in the model that we are currently working with, we decided to make CNI a site-based committee as opposed to a curriculum-based committee, so that every site would be represented, but that every person who commits to CNI committee also commits the idea of participating in an action team when they need to be constituted. So if there is something, for example, and we were just talking to Ms. Loftus today about career college career readiness. Well, there's not a CCR action team on our list in our bylaws, but wouldn't it be great if we had one? And so when there's work to be done in that area, we can take the existing CNI folks, create a small action team, provide them with tasks that need to be accomplished, or whatever that is that needs to be done. They need to recruit other folks from the sites as well. That's great. And then when that work is done, they just kind of fall back into the fold of CNI, and that committee continues to move forward. So that's just one example of how we're moving forward with that.
Thank you.
Mr. Lara, do you have anything?
I'm just wondering why you just barely sent the documents today, you said? Mr.
I'm sorry, I can't really hear you very well.
Oh, no, I'm not. How's that? That better?
Yeah.
I'm just concerned, why were the documents just sent today to Mr. Ontiveros and we couldn't get them earlier?
That's a great question. I really hadn't thought about sharing those out with you all at all. It just occurred to me today as I was going through creating the presentation, figuring out what I was going to share. It dawned on me that you all didn't have access to these. So it wasn't an intent to withhold them for any period of time. It just didn't occur to me to share them out.
Okay, I thought that was something we had talked about when this was established, as far as you shared with us, as far as what was going to be going on with you as, being full-time release, and
Yeah.
Today, just concerned.
I think our original intent back in 2018 was for there to be ongoing updates, kind of like what we're doing right now, right? And so the actual evaluations that I submit to NEA year to year, just like I said, it never dawned on me, didn't occur to me to incorporate those into an update. And so until I was putting this together today, I just realized that I had those and I was going through them, and that's why I shot them out to you. But you're right. Maybe that should have been the annual update all along, right?
Yeah, that would have been nice. Thank you.
No, I think that my recollection must not be correct, because I don't remember it being an annual thing at all. I remember it being a episodic or periodic thing that was more frequent than that. So I think that was part of the concern that Mr. Lara is expressing, was that, yeah, not just because I looked at it, something like it was thoughtful for you to send it, but for us to know what you're sending to NEA to talk to them about why you're fulfilling the grant that they're giving you is good. But I mean, it kind of goes along with the same premise that you're saying, okay, well, I'm talking to you guys because you gave me the release, but I'm really talking to my constituency. Again, you've got your fireside chats to do that all the time. So part of what's going on now is that rather than fulfilling the NEA's grant requirements, we had asked in the beginning when we discussed full release that we get the periodic updates as to not just what was going on with PD for me or some of those things, but how you were interacting on a fairly regular basis with the teachers on the sites or however, so that we could see that there was efficacy in that 100% release. So I think that's kind of where the breakdown in what the question is to you, Mr. Segura, is it's not so much the what we're getting right now. It's just that even with COVID notwithstanding, it's been a long time that we've heard what was going on with your full release, and so we had expected. I know I guess that must have been more verbal than it was anything written, that was going to be some of the conditions of the release, and that you were amenable to that, and you seemed at the time enthusiastic about doing it. And so it's, for me anyway, it's been a bit of a disappointment that rather than hearing what you're doing for the people you're representing as far as those teachers goes, that we didn't get a chance to see that in a kind of a timely, regular basis, rather than here at the end game. So at this point, I guess that's something that if the release were to continue, that we would want to revisit, so that there was regular communications between us, rather than, like you said, when there's a crisis or there's something that you're dealing with, that's more emergent. So I think, that was part of the concern, I think, on the board's behalf. But thank you for coming tonight, and thank you for the update. And the garage door was just it looks like it blew out your fireplace, though, because there's no fire anymore.
It's a cold night in Santa Maria.
Yeah, you got to light that bad boy up.
And Mr. Hollington, I'm more than happy to come back anytime if Mr. Ontiveros wants to put me on the agenda. Even you want me to do a weekly State of the Union I'm happy to do that. That's not a problem at all. I did suggest that back before Mr. Ontiveros was superintendent about being a regular item on the agenda to report on a regular basis. But the previous superintendent didn't have an interest in that, and I guess I've never brought it up since then.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we have completed the agendized items. Does anybody have any, I guess on a study session, there's not really any board reports, but is there anything anybody wishes to contribute on that order?
I do have something that I would like to share.
Thanks, Mr. Ontiveros.
Something that has come up, and I want to give credit to Carlos. Somebody else must have muted me. Carlos Murtha, our new coordinator of Food and Nutrition Services, put together a program for the Thanksgiving holidays to provide families with a box, because we won't do meal distribution. We continue. And so this is a sample of what the box will include for families. I don't know if anybody can hear me through John's microphone. He's got some bulk commodities that we'll share with families. And they'll be given this box prior to the Thanksgiving break so that there's an opportunity for families to share. And again, I just want to, it's really just some creative thinking. That is pasta. And so the boxes will contain those bulk commodities that families will be able to access over the Thanksgiving break, when we will not be doing food distribution. So I just wanted to be able to share that, because by the next time we meet, we'll be so close. It'll be the week before Thanksgiving. And so I wanted to give a little preview of that. And if there's any other information you need, that's already being communicated out to families to know that it's going to be something that will be available for them.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, we won't be doing the meal distribution with the schools closed on Thanksgiving, but this will be the week prior.
Well, and in addition to that, Mr. Ontiveros, I forgot to tell you guys, my wife and some of the folks at Hancock put together a trick-or-treat drive-through over at Hancock, where there'll be some candy passed out in the parking lot. And I think there might be some of the drama kids from the high schools and some other folks, faculty and whatnot, passing out candy there. So I did a big drop off of our full-size candy bars, since we're not doing it at home. So
This weekend?
yeah, Saturday. Thanks. Yeah. I think I better check. I better make sure it's Saturday and not Friday.
There is one tomorrow night too, out at Fresco Park, that the city has organized with various organizations in the community.
Nice.
And it may not all just be candy. I don't know for sure.
So it's on a Thursday night?
It's on Thursday night.
I'll check to be sure from my wife as to the exact date, and then I'll pass that along to you guys so you can disseminate it to your massive families.
I did.
Which
We're doing the trunk or treat.
Yeah.
Well, I knew about that one.
Yeah, actually my daughter got a fire truck to come to live in.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
So there were some things is going on.
There's,
Not necessarily on Halloween night.
correct.
I don't know what time the one is tomorrow night.
You need to find out.
I just don't want you to feel out, Mr. Valencia, if there's any trick or treating that you know about that's going on. Alrighty, so that all being said, it sounds like we're ready to sign off.